안녕하세요 여러분, 슐리입니다. 여러분, 제가 처음에 유튜브를 시작을 했을 때요, 제 일상을 좀 소소하게 기록하고 공유하는 것도 있지만 제가 배운 것들을 여러분들하고 나누는 공간으로 쓰면 어떨까 하는 생각이 있었어요. 제 주변에 정말 다양한 일을 하고 멋진 친구들이 많은데 이 친구들의 이야기를 저만 듣는 게 아니라 친구들하고 이야기를 나누면서 촬영을 해서 유튜브에 올리면 여러분들에게도 도움이 되지 않을까 하는 생각이 좀 있었어요. 예전에 제가 친구들을 인터뷰한 영상이 있었는데 저도 너무너무 좋았고, 그리고 여러분들도 굉장히 좋다고 해주셔서 아예 슐터뷰, 배움 나눔소, 인터뷰 시리즈를 좀 만들어보면 어떨까 싶어요. 오늘 제가 슐터뷰에 모신 게스트는요, 저랑 정말 친한 친구 스테파니인데요. 스테파니는 미국 명문대 노스웨스턴을 졸업하고 미국의 정말 메이저급 신문사, 방송사에서 PD와 기자생활을 하고 있는 친구예요. 지금은 LA타임즈에서 이제 아시아 특파원으로 기자 활동을 하고 있고, 얼마 전에 홍콩에 출장 겸 여행을 왔거든요. 제가 이때다 싶어서 스테파니한테 인터뷰를 좀 요청했습니다. 여러분, 스테파니 정말 야무지고 똑똑한 친구거든요. 얼른 바로 시작해볼게요. Hi Steph! Welcome to my channel! Can you please introduce yourself to friends who are watching this?
Yeah. Hi, my name is Stephanie Young. I'm a journalist.
In Venezuela only make up a fraction of the country's total imports, so that there was no risk to any other residents here. And some of the residents here. So I'm in a massive cannabis field right now, and we're not in Colombia or Colorado. We're actually in China, near the Himalayas.
And I have been for the past, oh my gosh, almost 10 years? 9 years? I originally grew up in Iowa in the United States. I moved to Taipei about 3 years ago. Right after I finished high school in Iowa, I went to school in Chicago. And then I moved to New York. I was there for about 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
Worked in Beijing for a while, and now I'm in Taipei. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, let's talk about what you do.
Sure. So I'm a China correspondent for the LA Times. Previously, I was with the Wall Street Journal in Beijing and New York. And right now, I cover all of China and Taiwan and broader Asia.
Did you study journalism?
Yeah, so I went to Northwestern University in Chicago. They have a journalism program for undergraduate and graduate. So I did the undergraduate program. And right after that, I went into working in media in New York.
Oh wow, that's so cool. Is that what you always wanted to study, journalism?
I actually wanted to major in was poetry. My parents actually had different plans for me. They wanted me to be a doctor or a lawyer, and I wanted to be an unemployed writer. So the compromise was journalism.
Yeah. When did you decide to study journalism?
It was after I got into college. One of the colleges that I applied to had a journalism program, and so I thought, you know, this is something that's a little bit more writing focused and also has a little bit more of a clear career path than just writing fiction or poetry or memoirs or personal essays, things like that.
Oh, that's so cool.
And I thought it would be a really good opportunity to travel and learn more about the world and talk to different types of people. So it seemed like a good fit.
Yeah. So after you graduated from Northwestern, where did you go after? You went straight to New York or Wall Street Journal?
So while I was studying in college,
Yeah.
I had a couple of different internships. So I interned at TechCrunch in San Francisco Bay Area.
Oh, okay.
So that's when I first got interested in tech and business. I did a short internship at the Chicago Sun-Times covering business, and then when I moved out to New York, it was for an internship writing about finance and Wall Street for Business Insider. And then I got an internship with the Wall Street Journal on their banking team.
You start internship junior year or after you graduate?
So around sophomore year.
Oh, I see. That's really early.
Even starting freshman year, I was looking for opportunities to write. So the college had, as most colleges do, they had a college newspaper. I tried that out for a little bit, but I found it really hard to juggle the extracurricular along with schoolwork. So what I did was I looked for internships during summer break mostly. Some of them I could do if I was only taking part-time classes, I could do in the city. So just carving out little bits of time to see what kinds of hands-on experience I could get.
Is that normal to have an internship that early, like starting freshman year for journalism?
I think so, especially because Northwestern was a pretty academically competitive college. So a lot of the people that went there were very driven and career oriented, and so I remember, partly the reason that I started looking so early is because I saw everyone around me start looking so early, and so it just seemed like that was kind of what you had to do in order to get ahead, or sometimes even keep up. It's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, that's the importance of people around you. Like it really motivated you too, right?
Yeah.
I think that's so important. Okay, so you went to Wall Street Journal, and how long did you work there?
I worked there for about 6 years.
Oh, okay. Wow, that's a long time.
Yeah.
And you cover mainly finance, right?
Yeah, so I started off doing an internship, and then I briefly did a 9-month stint at CNBC, also in markets and finance. So I really started off in financial journalism, partly because I found it quite interesting, and partly because that what seemed like it offered the most job stability. You always need people who are interested in explaining how markets and finance work.
That's true.
And so I thought it'd be a valuable skill to learn. And so when I started full-time at the Wall Street Journal, I was covering gold prices, which is a very niche topic. And I didn't know that that was a job that existed until I went to go interview there.
That is so interesting. But that's not what you studied, right? Like you just studied journalism?
Yes.
But you didn't really specialize or go into minorly in finance or anything, but you still went to go into finance sector.
Yeah. So
is that pretty normal?
I took a couple of business classes in college.
Okay.
But actually for a lot of different beats, we call them beats in journalism, and it's a specific topic that you cover. For a lot of beats, journalists end up learning a lot on the job. So I think there is a common misconception about journalism that you have to have a lot of existing knowledge to cover something like tech or finance or hardware or a lot of these esoteric things.
Yeah.
But actually what's great about being a journalist is you have a license to say, hey, I don't understand this thing at all, and then go to the smartest people that you can find and say, can you explain this to me? And then you get to learn about it, and you're never going to reach the expert level. Some people actually do. Some are really deeply specialized in what they cover. But for the vast majority of journalists, I believe they're just curious people. So a lot of people end up going in without a lot of prior knowledge, and then it's just years of learning.
So you never get bored? There's so many things to learn and explore.
Yeah, I mean, actually, a lot of journalists do get bored, and that's why they change beats every 3 to 5 to 7 years. Because you cover something for a while and you think, okay, well, I've learned a lot about this, but there's still so many other topics that I'm interested in. And so that's what's great about journalism also, is that the skill set that you acquire learning about a very particular topic is transferable to the next thing and the next thing. And so in a way, it's a career that kind of allows you to never really get bored.
Yeah, for sure. Do you get to decide which sector you go in, or is that the firm's decision? Usually, like when you first interview, do you get to choose what sector you want to specialize?
I think it depends on your bargaining power. So definitely you can apply for very specific jobs. And when I first started, I really just wanted to work at the Wall Street Journal. And so they called me in and they said, hey, we have this job opening on the stocks team. Would you be interested? I said, yeah, sure. Stocks are very widely applicable.
Right.
I covered them a little bit as an intern. And then I went in and they said, oh, actually, we filled that position, but we have another position covering gold. Would you want to do that? I had no idea what people could write about gold, but I really wanted to try it out, so I said, okay, sure, let's do it. And then I spent the next couple of years trying to be as creative as possible in thinking up weird and quirky gold stories to do. And so now I've gotten to the point where sometimes you just have to look at what's available, but as you kind of move up in your career, you have a little bit more leverage, and so you can go to the firm that you work for and say, hey, I really want to be based in this location. Hey, I really want to someday cover this topic. They can say, okay, we'll see what we can do down the road, and you really have to just kind of keep an eye out for those opportunities.
What is the interview process like to get into this top firms like Wall Street Journal?
I think this also varies quite a bit depending on who you're interviewing with and what kind of job you're applying for. If you're covering breaking news, the main thing is you want to be fast and you want to be clear. And if you're applying for a job that writes more features or enterprise, you want to give story ideas that are more unique, maybe something that people hadn't thought of, or a different way of looking at something. And it also depends, where in your career you are. So some places they have writing tests.
Oh, I see.
Well, they'll send you a test and then you have to kind of write up the certain stories that they expect. I think that's what I did when I first applied for an internship at Business Insider. They want to look at your past clips to see what kinds of stories you've done. And I think it's similar to some other job interviews where they throw questions your way and they don't expect you to have the exact perfect answer, but they want to see how your brain works around the problem.
Your thought processes.
Yeah, and so what they're really trying to assess is, does the way you think about stories align with how we think about stories?
So how do you reach out to them? You just cold call and then reach out on LinkedIn? Like,
I've interviewed people before. I think I really appreciate persistence because that's something that comes in handy with journalism. So I would say don't be afraid to really go after it. If you really want to make contact with someone, and this is similar in journalism and also in job hunting, try them on LinkedIn. They have the standard corporate email. Try their corporate email. Try their Twitter. Try journalism conferences. There are tons of journalism conferences where a lot of the events are an opportunity to network with top editors. And they also have booths at career fairs and expos, like looking for people. So there are ways to find them, and it shows your resourcefulness if you can get in touch.
so you can't just wait for the opportunity. You need to really go out there and like get it.
Yeah, I think that definitely helps.
I think it's for all industry, but I think it's really applicable for journalist industry for sure, because you have to really be a go-getter, right? So what makes a good story? You mentioned that you have to kind of show what stories that they're looking for and what you want to write about. What makes a good story, and how do you find good story?
That's a really good question. I think it's a question that journalists and writers are asking themselves all the time, and how to make their story the best version that it can be.
Yeah.
So what I try and think about is when I look at stories, I want to make sure that all the angles possible are accounted for. So, you know, you want to talk to a variety of people. You know, you don't want to just talk to one particular viewpoint. So one of the things that I think helps make a good story is making sure that you get every angle that you can possibly think of and include as many viewpoints as possible in a story.
You don't want to be one-sided, or like you want to make sure everyone's viewpoint is included in the one story. That makes me think, because you know we're making a YouTube video. Also journalism, writing a story, writing a content, it is producing content. Do you ever think about like the click rates and like how much attention this story is gonna get when you write a story? How does it impact you?
Yeah, I think about this a lot, and I think a lot of people in the journalism industry think about this a lot, because one of the challenges that journalism is facing is how do we make money?
Yeah.
And that comes down to, you know, thinking about what do people want to read, what do people care about. So you really do have to think about, you know, click rate, audience, subscriber base, things like that. But at the same time, I think that there also is an understanding that sometimes the most valuable journalism is not always what's going to get the most clicks.
Yeah.
I think it comes down to balance.
Yeah.
You want to think about, you know, what people are going to be interested in, but you also want to make sure that your stories add value and try and go one step further than, you know, summarizing something when possible. So like I said, there are different types of stories. I think some stories, you know, you write them just because they are important.
Yeah.
And you feel that it's news that people should read.
Right.
And then some stories you write because they're really fun and you just think that people would really enjoy it.
Yeah. That makes me want to ask you how you can get good at writing. Because as career progresses, I've been working for 13 years, over 10 years, and I see that people who are really, really good at writing, they talk better and they just do better in their career. I think it's also because they are able to structure their thoughts and ideas better. So that's something that I always wanted to work on and improve. So do you have any tips for me and my friends who are watching this to how to improve the writing skills?
Yeah, I think about this a lot too.
Oh
I
my
think
gosh.
writers are always trying to become better writers.
Do you still practice and like think about it?
I think about it all the time. I practice all the time, and even I'll go back and read, you know, some things that I've written and think there could be a better way to do this. The most important thing I think when it comes to writing is just practicing all the time, like writing and rewriting. For stories or for personal writing, you know, I'll write a draft. I'll leave it for a while and then I'll come back and look at it with fresh eyes. So sometimes you just need to give your brain a break and then come back to it, and you'll see things that you didn't see the first time. And so I think one of the strategies for good writing is, you know, how can I say this concisely and how can I say this clearly? So communication is a very important skill set in a lot of different types of jobs, because you want to be able to make yourself clear as fast and as efficiently as possible.
Yeah, you're so good at that.
Oh.
You're so good at this. Okay, so what makes a good writing is to not make it too long and just make it like short and simple, still able to deliver the message.
Yeah, I think that it's a sign of good writing when you don't need too many words to make your point.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can take a lot of words and write something really beautiful. But I think as far as if you are working in a workplace and you want to just communicate something like clearly and quickly, if you write it, take a break, come back, think, oh, I can cut out these words. I can, change this. I can say this more clearly.
Yeah.
That can help.
Oh, I see. That's good to know. Okay. I think you also mentioned that. So when I asked you a few days ago how you can get good at writing, you talked about how you read books and articles and try to sort of mimic that writing styles. Does that help?
I like to think so.
Yeah.
It's hard to say because there's not a quantitative way to measure good writing, but I do think that reading a lot is helpful for writing because you take a lot of ideas from other writers, you see what they've done well, and then you try and incorporate that into your own writing. So a lot of times, I'll write a story about a topic and I'll go back and I'll read everything that anyone else has written to see, are there angles that I missed? Are there ways that they could explain something really clearly that I didn't think of? And I always learn from that.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good idea. You actually read a lot. You are here for only 1 week and you brought 2 books. One is Chinese and one in English. How often do you read? Or how many books do you go through?
It fluctuates. I'll read a couple of books a month, but I think it's when you have all these responsibilities, it's really hard to find a time to read books. So, I think being in a book club helps. It's just, when everyone picks a book and they get together and then you read it and then you discuss it. It has a level of accountability, and I don't always finish the books in the book club, but it adds an accountability that, it's something that you guys are going to discuss together, and so it sets a bit of a schedule for you to at least be motivated enough to read the book, and then you get to gather with friends and eat snacks and chat.
Yeah.
And I also think, talking to other people about their book recommendations helps.
So going back to the interview process and how you got into journalism, how do you talk to people that they don't want to talk to? How do you track those people down?
I've heard a lot of different and very resourceful tactics.
Yeah.
I personally would not say I'm the very, very best at this, but one is being persistent. Definitely, try every single angle that you can think of. So for example, when I was an intern back in 2015, I was trying to interview this guy who, wouldn't really talk to me, or he wouldn't really talk to anyone. A lot of people were trying to interview him. And then I went and found a video that the PR firm that he had hired, this is a pretty young guy, the PR firm that he had hired had posted a video on YouTube, and I reached out to that firm, and he said that I was one of the only people that reached out to the firm itself, on top of reaching out to him.
Oh, wow.
So he agreed to meet with me. Whereas I don't know if he told me he didn't really take any other meetings. But so sometimes it's just about finding the right channel, and so it always helps to just try every single channel. There's LinkedIn, there's email, there's Twitter, there's Facebook, there's some people go out and check out where people live, or they know where someone hangs out. They go to their workplaces, they ask friends of friends. So it's really about trying to find what is the path to this person, and then when you find the person, also presenting it in a way that maybe is less intimidating to them. A lot of people don't want to speak to media because they don't really understand how media works, or they're very wary, or they've been burned before. But I think it helps to kind of be open about what you're trying to write about, as upfront as possible. If they have any questions for you on what you're working on, this is the kind of questions you're going to ask. I think that can also help just to put them at ease, because if you approach someone and they don't really know what a journalist does and what you're going to be writing about, they tend to be a little bit more closed off.
Yeah, I think it also helps that you're very cute and friendly.
Thanks. I mean, that is one strategy, and then some other strategies is being very commanding and being very authoritative, and so everyone has their own actually type of strategy that best fits their personality. Some of it is also catering best to what works for you, what feels natural to you. What works for someone one way doesn't necessarily work for someone else.
Yeah. Is there any times that you had to write a story that you're not really interested in, or you're opposed to? Is there any time that you were ever frustrated to write this story? Or do you only get to choose whatever you want to write?
I think the vast majority of journalists do not get complete say over whatever they cover. I think if you do, you're probably a very senior journalist that's really, really proven themselves. With every journalism job, you're going to have editors, and you're going to have beat responsibilities. So that means that sometimes you'll cover things that you're not the most passionate about, just because they're important, or they're big news, or it's your job, or your editors are really interested, or everyone else is covering it, and so you think, okay, this is something that you just have to be on because it's the news. For example, when I covered markets, I wasn't super passionate about oil prices or natural gas prices, but that was just part of the job. And I think for those things, you try and do it as quickly as possible, get it out of the way, and then use whatever time you can to focus on the stories that you really do care about and that you have more fun doing. So I think also with that, it's a balance of your expected responsibilities. It's just, part of it is you're covering an industry, it's your job, you gotta stay on top of things. And then trying to find the time to do the stories that get you really excited and are quite fun to do.
Oh, okay. Can I ask you how much journalists in US they make? And maybe talk about the entry level if I were to go a journalism school. If I graduated, how much would that be? Would I make as an entry level? And also if I were to work maybe 10 years like you, how much can I make in my age group? Can you just talk about kind of range?
Yeah, sure. So I haven't looked at this in a few years because I've been living in Asia. I think when I first got started about 10 years ago, there was starting to become a shift. People didn't really talk about their salary very much. But I remember that when I first started as an intern and entry-level journalist, there was more of an effort to try and be transparent just so that everyone could get paid more equally. There is still a vast discrepancy as far as as I remember. So for example, when I was first starting out, I believe the jobs that I was applying for ranged between maybe 40,000 to 65, 70,000 US dollars a month, depending on where you
10 years
worked.
ago.
Yes, this is in 2015, 2016. But that being said, I had also heard about full-time or internships that paid 25,000 US dollars a year, which is very low.
Yeah.
Right, and very hard to make this work. Oh, and this is specifically for New York City. I'm not exactly sure what it is now, especially because places have gotten more expensive.
Yeah.
And then once you get to about 10 years in, I think that you do tend to move up, but it's still quite a range. So I'd say maybe about 90,000 to 150,000 I've heard, anywhere between there.
Okay.
And then when you become a really senior level journalist, I believe you can make upwards of 200,000. And this is just me guessing based off of little things that I've heard.
How's your work-life balance? I have some Korean journalists and their work-life balance is not very good. I see you're always just really, really calm, and I feel like your work-life balance is you're keeping it really, really well. How do you manage your stress? How do you balance your work-life life?
It's hard because journalism is an industry in which you're really expected to work more than the average hours. There are several careers like this where in order to get ahead, I actually wouldn't even say that I have the best work-life balance. Sometimes I get a little bit overwhelmed because now without an office to go into, the lines get blurred. So during the day, maybe I can take time off and make myself lunch at home. But at the same time, if I'm don't have anything planned for the night and maybe I feel behind on stories, then I'll work or try and catch up. And so you never really feel off necessarily. And even when you're on vacation, for a lot of journalists, you still feel like you have to be on your phone, on your email, just in case something happens. Particularly if you cover a really big beat and something big happens on your beat. And so there is that kind of baseline expectation.
That is stressful.
Yeah, it's
Because
hard.
then you always have to think about stories. I mean, you're in Hong Kong now and you are constantly looking for stories.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's it's a good thing and it's a bad thing. I joke about this with my journalist friends because we'll be talking about something, and if you're with a bunch of journalists, sometimes you'll say something and someone will you'll see a light bulb go off. You're like, oh, that's a story. You're like, oh, that's a good story. And it's this little instinct in your brain. You're like, oh, I can envision the lead right now. I can envision how I write this story. And so once you kind of see that, it's hard to let that go because when you think of a good story, you're like, even if I don't do this story, someone should do this story. It's a good story. I think part of it is just knowing the limitations also on what you're able to do and being okay with that. Just being able to let some of those things go in order to conserve energy to kind of keep yourself going for the long term.
I mean, you work out a lot.
Yeah,
How
I think
often do you work out?
I probably go running a few times a week and then go to the gym a few times a week. And working out is a really great way to kind of reset your brain. Let yourself think about something else. So when you come back to it, it's like you're a new person, or you give it a new once-over. And that can help adjust it and look at it in a different way. So I really like working out for that particular purpose.
I was working out with you too. Is there any self-improvement routine that you stick to make your life not as stressful and just more peaceful and just more productive overall?
So I think, when it comes to work, I do try and actively and frequently think back on how a certain work process went, what kinds of stories I enjoyed most, what did well online, what did I get the best feedback on, and let it inform, where I want to go from there. Personally, I think that also kind of just like the more you experience, whether it's failures or setbacks or blips in the road. So more personally, I guess I've been thinking a lot about how to balance everything that you want to fit into your life, because it is a lot. It's work, it's health, it's friends, it's family, it's hobbies, it's fun, it's travel, you know. And so
you balance it really, really well.
Oh, I feel like I struggle so much.
What? No.
Yeah. So I've been thinking. I saw this thing on like Instagram Reels where it's like a circle, and then you give everything a value from 1 to 10, and then when something gets low, you maybe pay more attention to that area.
Real of life.
Yeah. So I really like that idea. I was like, maybe I should start doing this, because sometimes I feel things getting out of balance, and then I overcorrect. I'll think like, oh, I'm not doing enough of this, I should do way more of this, and then I'm like, oh, I'm not doing enough of this, I should do way more of this, and so you're kind of teetering back and forth all the time, and so it's something I think about a lot.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I recently also did that too. It's a wheel of life. It's like in 9 sectors. One is social, one is health, friends, family, spiritual, and you kind of grade where you are in the life, and then you go for the lowest one to improve, right? Is that the one that you're talking about?
So I haven't tried it yet, but I am curious about that, because I am constantly looking for ways to kind of be more efficient and also fit in all the things that I want to do. But also this is something that I feel like I'm going to steal from you, because you were talking about this, and that especially for driven people, or we constantly think about, how do I level up? And that's something I've been thinking about this past year. I was like, I want to level up, like how do I get to the next level, like how do I do better, and that can weigh on you a lot, and that can become really stressful. And so one of the things that I think I want to start working on is being okay where I am, and not putting so much pressure on myself to just like constantly be hitting the next milestone. Because like you said, like maintaining is work. Especially when you have a lot of things going on at once. And finding balance, you think about balance as something that's very calm, but it actually is like a constant adjustment and constant choices.
Oh, that makes me want to cry, because like I feel like a lot of smart women, they feel that, and then they just feel the never enough syndrome. Though they're doing everything so well, but you just feel like, oh, I'm just not doing enough, but you are doing enough, like it's okay, right?
I know, I feel that. I always feel like I'm never enough in any of these things, because my attention is split between so many interests that I just want to, I try to remind myself, and I try to remind my friends, and my friends try to remind me to just be kind to yourself and know that you're doing everything that you can do.
So a lot of friends who are watching my video and subscribing to our channel, they watch it because they want to do better in their lives, and they want to be motivated. Is there anything that you want to share and say to people out there in their 20s who are just starting out their careers, or just generally want to do well in their lives? Piece of advice. You've been all over the world too.
I guess from my perspective, one of the most valuable things that I've realized, and also one of the things that I kind of struggle with most, is just remembering to be kind to myself. Especially when you're younger, you feel like you have to accomplish all of this stuff before you turn a certain age, or you have to follow a certain path, and then, as you meet more people and as you experience more things, and ultimately more setbacks and failures, you realize that that's not really true. And what's important is taking the time to reflect on, what you want, what makes you happy, surround yourself with people who care about you, and also just make sure that it's good to keep learning and keep striving, keep growing, but at the same time, it's also okay to just take the time you need to maybe, stand still for a little bit. You don't always have to keep moving forward, because that can be really exhausting. It's okay if you don't work out today or listen to all the podcasts, and, one day, 1 week, 1 month, it's all very short and minor in the long term. So just as much as you can, just try and be kind and gentle to yourself and others.
That's so sad!
No, that's what I mean. I try, like it's hard. Like I struggle with it, but luckily I have friends that I've talked to about this, and so when I'm being hard on myself, I have them there to remind me like, hey, it's okay. And then I try and pay the favor back when I can. You know?
That's so nice. I feel like you were talking to me just now. So nice. This is why we get along so well. You're just the best. Okay, I think this is a really good piece of advice. Like, because I think all women, they're just so hard on themselves. But in their 20s, they should go forward. But always be kind to yourself. I think that is a really, really good piece of advice.
So I don't know if you do this, but something that I've learned like works for me is sometimes when I have kind of a negative feedback loop in my mind saying like, you're not doing enough, you're not excelling fast enough, you haven't accomplished enough. What I try and do is I try and imagine, you know, if I'm sitting in front of my good friend and saying all this, what would they say to me? And you know that your good friend would say, you're being too hard on yourself, look at all of it you've done, you're so capable, I believe in you. And if you don't have friends like that, you should get friends like that. Because it's so valuable. And so I try and imagine what my best friends would say to me, and then I try and say that to myself. Or I try and imagine if my friend was saying this to me, obviously what I would say back to them is, I really believe in you, I think that this is just, you know, very minor setback, and then I try and say that to myself. So just imagine that it's a friend. Imagine when you talk to yourself, imagine you're talking to a friend that you really believe in and care about. Because that's how you should be talking to yourself, really.
Wow. Thank you, Steph.
Yeah.
Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
being on my show and talking to my friends
I'm
and
so
sharing your
honored.
knowledge.
Thank you so much.
Love you!
I love you.
This is so good. 와, 여러분 어떠셨나요? 저와 워낙 다른 세계에서 일을 하고 있는 친구라 저도 시간이 가는 줄 모르게 정말 흥미롭게 인터뷰를 진행했던 것 같아요. 여러분 저나 스테파니한테 궁금한 게 있으면 댓글로 달아주시고 이런 슐터비 시리즈 좋으시면 댓글 많이 달아주세요. 여러분의 피드백이 슐리이야기 채널을 성장시키는 데 많이 도움이 됩니다. 제가 유튜브를 오래오래 하려면 여러분들의 피드백이 많이 필요합니다. 오늘 시간 내서 봐주셔서 감사드리고 다음 영상에서 또 봬요. 안녕!